In the quiet, unassuming town of Bunnell, Florida, life seemed to follow a familiar rhythm. Nestled among tall pines and winding back roads, it was the kind of place where neighbors greeted each other in passing, where community gatherings were commonplace, and where everyone seemed to know everyone else, or so they thought. At the heart of this tranquil setting lived Charles Butch Singer, a 48-year-old man who, despite being legally blind, had built a life defined by resilience and determination. Known for his warm smile and a knack for making others feel at ease, Charles was a beloved figure in his small circle. By his side was Dorothy Singer, his wife of several years, a woman whose quiet demeanor made her seem like the epitome of loyalty and devotion. Together, they appeared to lead an ordinary, if modest life in their small home, a place that bore witness to their shared routines, quiet conversations, and seemingly unremarkable existence. But the quiet was shattered in early 2017. Charles Singer suddenly vanished. No goodbyes, no warnings, just an unsettling silence that sent ripples through those closest to him. Dorothy was quick to offer an explanation. She told friends and family that Charles had left after an argument. According to her, he was heading out of state, perhaps to Georgia or Kentucky, as he had done in the past. Her words seemed plausible at first. After all, disagreements between couples were nothing unusual, and Charles's independent streak was well known. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the cracks in her story began to show. Family members received sporadic text messages from Charles's phone, offering vague reassurances about his whereabouts. Yet these messages raised more questions than they answered. They were riddled with misspellings and phrasing that didn't align with the Charles they knew. A man who relied on speech recognition technology to communicate due to his blindness. Each message felt less like a connection and more like an eerie echo of someone who wasn't truly there. As concern mounted, Dorothy's behavior began to draw quiet scrutiny. She seemed oddly calm, even detached, for a woman whose husband had been missing for months. She maintained her story, but the details remained frustratingly vague. The timeline disjointed. Friends noticed her growing reclusiveness. Neighbors whispered about her late-night trips and the strange quiet that had settled over their once bustling home. Then the rumors began. Some whispered of marital strife, others of financial troubles, but no one could imagine the truth that was slowly coming to light. Behind closed doors, beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful life, something far darker had been unfolding, something that would leave the small town of Bunnell reeling. The tipping point came when law enforcement, spurred by growing suspicion, began piecing together the fractured narrative. A deeper investigation into Charles's disappearance revealed inconsistencies, strange financial activity, and mounting evidence that pointed not to a man who had chosen to leave, but to something far more sinister. What they uncovered on the property, buried under layers of deception and soil, would forever change how this story was told. Who was Dorothy Singer? Was she a grieving wife, desperate to cover up a misunderstanding? Or was she something else entirely? A woman with a secret so dark it could tear apart the fabric of her quiet life. The truth about what happened to Charles Singer was about to send shockwaves through this tight-knit community. But what was the cost of uncovering it? And why did it take so long to find answers? This is the chilling, true story of Dorothy Singer, the woman whose actions shattered a family and stunned a town. What led her down this path? And how did she attempt to conceal a crime so heinous? Stick around as we unravel the layers of this deeply unsettling case. Dorothy Singer, a 60-year-old resident of Flagler County, Florida, was known to her neighbors as a quiet and unassuming woman. She lived with her husband, Charles Butch Singer, in a modest home on Pine Tree Lane. Their relationship, though seemingly ordinary, was marked by frequent disputes and underlying tensions. In early 2017, Charles disappeared without a trace. Dorothy claimed that after a heated argument, he had left their home, possibly heading to Georgia or Kentucky, as he had done in the past. She portrayed him as unpredictable, prone to sudden departures. However, as weeks turned into months, Charles's family grew increasingly concerned. They received sporadic text messages from his phone, but the tone and spelling seemed uncharacteristic, raising suspicions about their authenticity. The Flagler County Sheriff's Office began an investigation, during which Dorothy's inconsistent statements and peculiar behavior intensified suspicions. Detectives discovered that Dorothy had been using Charles's credit and EBT cards during his absence, and had even impersonated him in text messages to family members. A critical breakthrough came when detectives analyzed Dorothy's cell phone records. Using advanced cellular technology, they discovered that texts from Charles's phone originated near the couple's property, despite Dorothy claiming he had traveled out of state. This evidence contradicted her story and placed her at the scene of the crime during the time of Charles's disappearance. A search of the property led to a grim discovery. Charles's decomposing body was found buried under an overturned John boat, concealed beneath debris and mothballs. He had been shot 5 times, once in the chest and 4 times in the head. Dorothy was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During her trial, she claimed self-defense, alleging years of domestic abuse. However, the prosecution presented evidence of premeditation, including her attempts to conceal the crime and mislead investigators. The jury found her guilty, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This case stands out not only for the brutality of the crime, but also for the elaborate lengths taken to cover it up. Dorothy's actions, ranging from financial deceit to impersonation, paint a chilling picture of a calculated effort to evade justice. The persistence of law enforcement and the unraveling of her web of lies captivated the local community, turning a seemingly ordinary domestic dispute into a case study of deception and murder. What drove Dorothy Singer to commit such a heinous act? Was it a culmination of marital strife, a desperate bid for freedom, or something more sinister? As we delve deeper into this case, we'll explore the events leading up to that fateful night, the investigation that followed, and the courtroom drama that ultimately led to her conviction. Stay with us as we uncover the layers of this disturbing story. Dorothy Singer, a 60-year-old woman living in the rural outskirts of Flagler County, Florida, led a life that to most appeared modest and unassuming. Her home, tucked away on Pine Tree Lane, was surrounded by dense woods, a quiet retreat where she and her husband, Charles Butch Singer, could exist away from the hustle and bustle of city life. But what unfolded within the walls of that home would later shock the community and reveal a series of dark and disturbing events. Charles Singer, affectionately known as Butch, was 48 years old. Despite being legally blind, Charles was a man of resilience and determination. He had worked at Flagler Roofing in the past and was known for his ability to tackle challenges head-on. His blindness, caused by a progressive condition, did little to dampen his spirit. Those who knew him described him as a kind-hearted individual who navigated life with quiet strength and dignity. He relied on Dorothy for support in his daily life, creating a bond that should have been built on trust and mutual care. Dorothy and Charles had been married for 3 years, though their relationship was far from a picture of harmony. From the outside, they seemed like an ordinary couple, navigating the ups and downs of married life. But for those who paid closer attention, the warning signs were there. Neighbors occasionally heard loud arguments echoing through the trees, and friends noted that their relationship was fraught with tension. Police reports would later confirm that their disputes were not uncommon and often escalated to involve law enforcement. The community around them was small and tightly knit. In Flagler County, people noticed when something seemed out of place, and the Singers' volatile relationship was no secret. Dorothy was known for her stoic demeanor. She rarely shared details of her personal life, even with those she interacted with regularly. Charles, on the other hand, had an approachable and friendly nature that made him well-liked among his acquaintances. Together, they seemed to balance each other out, Dorothy's quiet resolve complementing Charles's warmth. Yet behind closed doors, their marriage was anything but stable. Financial struggles only compounded the strain on their relationship. Dorothy worked at a gun manufacturing facility in Daytona Beach, assembling parts for AR-15 and M16 rifles. Her income, while steady, was not substantial. Charles's disability limited his ability to contribute financially, leaving the couple reliant on Dorothy's earnings and government assistance. This financial instability created a constant undercurrent of stress that often boiled over into heated arguments. Money was tight, and their modest home reflected their constrained circumstances. Neighbors later recalled that the couple's financial challenges seemed to weigh heavily on Dorothy. She appeared withdrawn and tired in the months leading up to Charles's disappearance, as though the burden of their situation was slowly wearing her down. Charles, despite his disability, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, relying on speech recognition technology to communicate and attempting to stay connected with friends and family. But even his upbeat demeanor couldn't mask the growing tension in their household. In early 2017, everything changed. One day, Charles was simply gone. Dorothy told anyone who asked that he had left after a particularly heated argument, a pattern she claimed wasn't unusual for him. According to her, Charles had packed up and headed out of state, possibly to Georgia or Kentucky. Her story was plausible enough. Charles had left before or during arguments, and Dorothy's calm insistence lent credibility to her words. Yet as the weeks passed with no word from Charles, those closest to him began to question her account. Family members received sporadic text messages from Charles's phone, offering vague reassurances that he was fine. But these messages felt off. They were riddled with misspellings and odd phrasing, starkly different from the way Charles usually communicated. Given his reliance on speech-to-text technology, the errors were glaring. The more these messages arrived, the more they deepened the suspicion that something was amiss. The community, too, began to notice Dorothy's peculiar behavior. She had always been a private person, but in the wake of Charles's disappearance, she became even more reclusive. She rarely left the house except for work and seemed to avoid interactions with neighbors. Rumors began to circulate. Some speculated that the couple's financial troubles had driven Charles to leave for good. Others whispered about the possibility of foul play, though no one dared voice their suspicions outright. What few could imagine was the extent of what had truly transpired. Beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary life lay a series of actions that would eventually unravel Dorothy's carefully constructed story. Investigators, spurred by the inconsistencies in her account and the strange messages sent from Charles's phone, began to dig deeper. What they would uncover on that quiet stretch of Pine Tree Lane would leave the community stunned and force them to question how well they truly knew the couple who had lived among them. What drove Dorothy Singer to the breaking point? Was it the relentless pressure of financial hardship, years of unresolved conflict, or something far more calculated? The answers lay buried, both metaphorically and literally, and as the investigation progressed, the shocking truth would finally come to light. Stay with us as we unravel the layers of a story that turned a quiet corner of Florida into the scene of one of its most chilling crimes. According to Dorothy's later testimony, the day began with a disturbing discovery. She claimed that Charles had killed her kittens and laid them out on the porch steps for her to find. This alleged act of cruelty escalated tensions between them. Later, Dorothy recounted that Charles, armed with a gun, dragged her by the hair toward a hog cage behind their property, threatening to lock her inside so she couldn't eat and even threatening to kill her. She described a struggle during which the gun went off, fatally wounding Charles. In a state of panic, Dorothy faced the immediate aftermath of the shooting. Rather than contacting authorities, she chose to conceal the crime. She dragged Charles's body to a secluded area on their property, buried him in a shallow grave, and concealed the site with debris and an overturned John boat. To mask the odor of decomposition, she scattered mothballs over the grave. In the weeks following Charles's disappearance, Dorothy wove a complex web of deceit to mislead family members and authorities. She told neighbors and acquaintances that Charles had left for Georgia or Kentucky after an argument. To further support her narrative, she used Charles's bank cards and fabricated text messages from his phone, attempting to maintain the illusion that he was still alive and had willingly left. Dorothy's actions during this period were calculated to avoid suspicion. She continued with her daily routines, maintaining her job at the gun manufacturing facility and interacting with neighbors as usual. Her demeanor remained calm and collected, giving no outward indication of the crime she had committed. As time passed without any direct contact from Charles, his family grew increasingly concerned. They reported him missing, prompting the Flagler County Sheriff's Office to initiate an investigation. Detectives visited the Singer residence multiple times, interviewing Dorothy about her husband's whereabouts. She consistently maintained her story that Charles had left voluntarily after an argument. However, inconsistencies in Dorothy's accounts and her use of Charles's bank cards raised red flags. A critical breakthrough came when detectives analyzed cell phone records, revealing that messages purportedly sent by Charles had originated near the couple's property, contradicting Dorothy's claims that he was out of state. With mounting evidence, authorities obtained a search warrant for the property. During a thorough search, they discovered the concealed grave beneath the John boat. Charles's body was exhumed, revealing 5 gunshot wounds, 4 to the head and 1 to the chest. Confronted with the evidence, Dorothy was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her initial claims of self-defense were undermined by her extensive efforts to conceal the crime and mislead investigators. The community, once unaware of the darkness that had enveloped the Singer household, was left in shock as the details of the crime came to light. The investigation's success was attributed to the persistence of law enforcement and the careful analysis of forensic evidence, which together unraveled Dorothy's intricate web of lies and brought justice for Charles Singer. As the investigation into Charles Singer's disappearance deepened, a series of pivotal discoveries began to unravel the truth, casting a stark light on the events that had transpired. Forensic analysis further uncovered blood residue in the master bedroom, particularly on the headboard, carpet, and curtains, evidence that had been meticulously cleaned but not entirely erased. A critical piece of evidence was the murder weapon, a .22 caliber revolver. Dorothy's sister disclosed to investigators that Dorothy had borrowed the firearm approximately a year prior and returned it a few months before the discovery of Charles's body. Ballistic tests confirmed that the bullet fragments retrieved from Charles's remains matched this revolver, directly linking Dorothy to the crime. Confronted with the mounting evidence, Dorothy's narrative began to crumble. Initially, she maintained that Charles had left voluntarily after an argument. However, under the weight of forensic findings and inconsistencies highlighted by investigators, she altered her story, claiming self-defense. She alleged that Charles had become violent, dragging her by the hair toward a hog cage with the intent to harm her, and that during the ensuing struggle, the gun discharged accidentally. Despite this new account, the evidence contradicted her claims. The pattern and number of gunshot wounds, the location of the bloodstains, and her extensive efforts to conceal the body all pointed toward premeditation rather than an act of self-defense. Moreover, her actions following the murder, such as using Charles's phone to send deceptive messages and attempting to impersonate him, further undermined her credibility. In a final attempt to evade justice, Dorothy planned to fake her own death and flee the area. She left a suicide note in her car, parked near Matanzas Inlet, and was preparing to leave the state when law enforcement apprehended her. This desperate act only served to reinforce the perception of her guilt. Faced with irrefutable evidence and her failed attempts to mislead authorities, Dorothy Singer was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The community, once oblivious to the dark events unfolding within the Singer household, was left in shock as the full extent of her actions came to light. The case against Dorothy was compelling, built on a foundation of forensic science, diligent police work, and the unraveling of her own fabrications. As the legal proceedings advanced, the focus shifted to ensuring that justice was served for Charles Singer, whose life had been tragically cut short. In the quiet community of Flagler County, Florida, the arrest of Dorothy Singer sent shockwaves through the local populace. On May 9, 2017, following the discovery of her husband Charles Butch Singer's body concealed beneath an overturned John boat on their property, Dorothy was apprehended and charged with first-degree murder. Dorothy's arrest marked the beginning of a complex legal battle. The prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting the premeditated nature of the crime. Evidence included the multiple gunshot wounds inflicted upon Charles, the deliberate concealment of his body, and Dorothy's subsequent actions to mislead investigators. Testimonies from law enforcement officers detailed the meticulous efforts taken to cover up the crime, including the use of mothballs to mask the odor of decomposition and the purchase of a tarp to wrap the body. In her defense, Dorothy testified that she acted in self-defense, alleging that Charles had become violent, dragging her by the hair toward a hog cage with the intent to harm her. She claimed that during the ensuing struggle, the gun discharged accidentally, resulting in Charles's death. After deliberating for approximately 3 hours and 45 minutes, the jury found Dorothy Singer guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Dennis Craig sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In November 2019, the Fifth District Court of Appeal reversed Dorothy's conviction, citing the trial court's denial of a continuance after the late disclosure of DNA evidence. This decision granted her the opportunity for a new trial. Facing the prospect of a retrial and the overwhelming evidence against her, Dorothy opted to enter a plea agreement. In February 2020, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 32.5 years in prison. The tragic case of Dorothy and Charles Singer underscores the complexities of domestic relationships marred by conflict, financial strain, and alleged abuse. Dorothy's actions, ranging from the murder itself to the elaborate cover-up, suggest a culmination of psychological and emotional turmoil. The impact on the community was profound. Neighbors who once perceived the Singers as a typical couple were left grappling with the reality of the violence that had occurred in their midst. The case also highlighted the challenges law enforcement faces in uncovering the truth behind closed doors, especially when initial appearances can be deceiving. Surviving family members of Charles Singer were undoubtedly affected by the loss and the revelations that followed. The legal proceedings, appeals, and eventual plea deal extended the period of uncertainty and grief, delaying closure. In reflecting on whether justice was served, it's essential to consider the legal outcomes alongside the broader societal implications. While Dorothy Singer was held accountable for her actions through the legal system, the case prompts deeper questions about the underlying issues that lead to such tragedies. It serves as a somber reminder of the importance of addressing domestic conflicts proactively and the need for community awareness and intervention in situations of potential abuse or violence. As we conclude this examination of the Dorothy Singer case, we are left to ponder the intricate web of human relationships and the factors that can lead to such irreversible actions. The story stands as a testament to the necessity of vigilance, compassion, in the pursuit of justice in our communities. Dorothy Singer's story is a tragic reminder of how unresolved conflicts, compounded by years of tension and hardship, can lead to irreversible actions that destroy lives. In the end, a quiet home in Flagler County became the setting for a murder that shocked a community and revealed the fragility of relationships pushed to the breaking point. But the question remains, what truly led Dorothy to take her husband's life? Was it the result of years of pent-up frustration, a desperate attempt to escape an abusive relationship, or something far deeper and darker? These are the questions that linger, leaving room for reflection on the choices that define us and the paths they lead us down. Now we turn to you. What do you believe? Did Dorothy Singer deserve the sentencing she received? Or do you think her story still holds unanswered questions that deserve a closer look? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you're drawn to true crime stories that dive deep into real-life cases, uncovering the events and emotions behind the headlines, then make sure to subscribe to our channel. We release gripping true crime stories every week, each one shedding light on the darkest corners of humanity. And one more thing, if you believe justice was served in this case, show your support by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications. Because if you don't, well, it might just look like you're siding with Dorothy, and that's a choice no one wants to explain. Stay tuned for more real-life cases that will leave you questioning the fine line between right and wrong.